In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to conduct an SQL injection. Now, for the exam, you are not going to be expected to use any of the tools I'm about to show you, and this is just for your education and awareness of how easy it is for an attacker to perform an SQL injection, so you can understand why it's so important to use input validation and input sanitization to prevent an SQL injection from occurring. Now, as I go through this demonstration, I want you to focus just on the idea of what is being done and not the specific tools or commands that I'm using, because all of these are things you will learn about if you go on to Pentest Plus later on in the future. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
So to begin this SQL injection, we first need an SQL injection vulnerable website or database. And so on the left of my screen, you can see the damn vulnerable web app version 1.0.7, which is being run inside the Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. My colleague machine is going to make a connection to it, which I've done here, to be able to access this website. Now, the way this form works is if you put in a user ID, for instance, record number 2, and hit submit, back will pop up the first and last name of the person. That's all this database interaction is doing for us. Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to grab that information, stop it from being sent to the web server from my browser by using my web proxy, and then I can capture the data from it that I need. To do that, I have to go to my proxy setting inside of Burp Suite. And right now you can see my intercept is on. Now I need to configure my web browser to actually use that proxy. So I'm going to go down to my preferences. And from preferences, we're going to go to advanced, click on network, and then click on settings under connection. From here, we can set up the manual proxy, and I'm going to use the localhost 127.0.0.1 on port 8080. This will tell it to use my Burp Suite tool. So if I go ahead and close that, now if I go in and say I want to get record number 3, notice when I submit it, I don't get the answer back in my web browser because my web browser hasn't actually made a connection to the web server that's going to give me that information. Instead, it sent it to the right over to Burp Suite, which has captured it. And notice that Burp Suite now has that cookie information that I need. It tells me the security level, it tells me the PHP session ID, and I'm going to be able to use that as part of my attack against this web server. So the first thing I want to do is I want to capture some of this information. First, I need to know the website that we were trying to go to. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and go into my terminal. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use SQL map-u, and we're going to provide the website that we're going to. So I'm just going to paste that in. And then I'm going to use -- cookie equals, and I'm going to copy the information from my cookie. So let me go ahead and bring that back over to Burp Suite, and we will copy this cookie information. And then we will paste that in. And from there, we're going to go ahead and hit enter. So at this point, it's going to start querying the database. The first thing it notices is that this is a MySQL database. So it's asking, do I want to skip all the test payloads for other databases? And in this case, we're going to just use the default of yes. And it's going to say, do you want to include all of the tests from MySQL? And we'll go ahead and say yes. And it's going to go through and start querying that database and trying to do different injections. So you'll notice here that it is trying to do different testing based on the version of MySQL, trying to do things that are stack queries and other errors to figure out what this is vulnerable to. So now it finds that it found an ID parameter that was vulnerable. That said ID equals 2 or ID equals 3. Do we want to keep testing others? We'll go ahead and say no, because we already found a way into this database. And now we're going to see everything that it found. So if I go ahead and scroll up a little bit, we find that the get ID is vulnerable. We also found that it was vulnerable based on a Boolean-based blind. It was vulnerable based on an and/or time-based blind. And it was vulnerable based on a union query. We also were able to find out that the web server was Linux Ubuntu 8.04. We found the version of Apache, the version of PHP, and the version of this database. And all of that information is now saved to this file as shown in green on the screen. But that really didn't give me a lot of details yet that I want to use. It just tells me information about our target. And so now what I want to do is I want to enumerate the databases. So I'm going to add a --dbs at the end and hit enter. This is going to go through and find what databases are on that server. Notice it found 7 databases: DVWA, Information Schema, Metasploit, MySQL, OWASP 10, TikiWiki, and TikiWiki 195. Now, the one we want to target here is the DVWA, the Damn Vulnerable Web App. And so now that we know what database we want to target, which is the DVWA, I want to select that database with my command. So I'm going to go arrow up again, go backspace, put a capital -D, which stands for database, and the database I want to select. And then I want to enumerate it for the tables to figure out what tables exist inside that database. So I'm going to put --tables, and that will tell me what tables are associated with it. Go ahead and hit enter. And it goes through and scans, and it finds two tables, guestbook and users. So now I want to be able to dump the columns from those tables. Again, I went from the database down to the table. Now I want to dig in a little bit further and get those columns. So to do that, we're going to arrow up. We're going to backspace out of tables and do -T and give it the table we want, which is users, and then -- columns. And off we go. We now have 6 columns: the user, avatar, first name, last name, password, and user ID. Wouldn't it be great if we can get those passwords for those users? I think it would. So let's go a little bit further here. And what we're going to do is arrow up, take out the word columns, and put in the word dump. And here we go. Do we want to save this hashes to a temporary file? We'll say no. And what it's doing is it's grabbing any password hashes from the password column, and it's going to attempt to do a dictionary attack to crack them. And then we're just going to go ahead and use the standard default dictionary of number 1. And we want to use common suffixes. No, we're just going to use the default things. And it's grabbed those hashes, and it's already starting to crack those passwords. Notice that I already have a password for Charlie, and ABC1, and password, and let me in. And here it is on the screen. And so you can see that the first user ID is admin, and their password in parentheses is password. The second user is Gordon B, and his password was ABC123. The third username was 1337, and their password was Charlie. The fourth was Pablo with let me in, and the fifth was Smitty with password. Again, these were all very simple passwords and easy to crack, but you can see the power of an SQL injection. We can interact directly with that database because we've been able to break through the PHP front end and be able to inject into the database and get information back that we shouldn't be able to get back. And because SQL Map is such an easy to use program, it makes our injections very automated and very easy to use.